The purpose of this screencast is to give an overview of the Office Breakout game that you experienced in week 1 and defend how it meets the criteria for the project and rubric for the grade of an A, receiving 30 points. So as you completed the breakout game, you know that the scenario was an office building where the employee ran out of toner, and so you needed to collect information and clues around the office in order to, and all of those clues ended up being numbers that the sum of them became the answer to the lock in the boss's office in order to unlock the toner. But the lesson itself was about business etiquette and business practices. So this would be good for, some sort of professional development in a corporate setting. We did want to provide, a non-classroom example to help with any trainers that may be going through the program as well. So some of the activities that the learners went through and that you went through is learning about why is communication important, what are some effective techniques of communication, and you did that through looking at slideshows, looking at websites, videos, and then you were kind of answering some assessments throughout to check your understanding. Notice that at the beginning of each of the main activities, the objectives were very clear in telling you as a learner what it is that you're supposed to be learning in that activity. So in this case, nonverbal messages that body language can send to others, that was the objective, and then you read, a website about that. And then we had, an assessment to kind of check your understanding, and you were able to pass on to the next activity. So this is something, by having these slides with the objectives at the beginning of each activity is an example of how the learning goals were kind of acknowledged throughout the lesson, and that the learning goals were appropriate to the developmentally appropriate to the standards. So while there were not specific standards per se for this workplace, these are objectives that would be appropriate to the workplace as a professional development. If you are a classroom teacher, then you are going to be picking lesson objectives that go with your grade level and content standards such as Common Core, Next Generation Science Standards, your state social studies standard, CTE standards, things like that. There's always the ISTE standards as well, for use of technology. So you want to be creating learning goals that match what your audience is. Again, as I kind of already mentioned, so looking at a rubric, so we just talked about the learning goals. The next bullet is theme. So as you guys know, this whole lesson was about the storyline, about running out of the toner, and that you need to collect the information to get into the locked closet. So that was the storyline that provided context and purpose for this game, and it was centered around the problem in that you had to try to get to the toner, and that was kind of the motivation to go to all the different rooms and collect all the information you needed. The checklist also served as a source of motivation because you know that there were, 5 pieces of information that you needed in order to get into that supply closet. And so by knowing that you needed to collect 5 things, you know that you had to explore around the office in the different areas. As far as learner choice goes, we designed this lesson to be non-sequential. So while you started at the top and there was only one place for you to go, which was the boss's office, from the boss's office you could go either to the end, you could go to the receptionist, or you could go to the breakout room. And eventually, through inquiry and kind of playing around with it, you would have found your way to either the breakout room or the receptionist. Once you were at the receptionist, then you had multiple other places you could go. You had the stairwell workstation 1, workstation 2, or the conference room. Or you could go back to the breakout room. So there were 5 or 6 different places that kind of branched off from just this middle receptionist, that gave you a lot of choice in which pathways you wanted to go explore next, and that choice was yours. To give you an example of how this same exact lesson could be could have been designed, in this case, it's all of the rooms are in the exact same spot, and the only thing that changed in this example for the A minus is the pathways. So notice here, again, in the example that is a grade of an A, we have lots of different pathways branching off, and you can kind of choose your way. Only moving the pathways, this changes the game entirely, because now, and this is for a lower score, this is an example of how it could have been done, and it would have been sequential. And so here you would have started at the copy room, gone to the boss's office, had to go to the receptionist's room, had to go to the breakout room, had to go to the stairwell, and work your way around the office that way. And you would have gotten all the information you needed, but it wouldn't have been as fun, or because you wouldn't have had that choice. And so the reason why I point this out is because simply changing the pathways can change the entire user experience, from something that is kind of forcing them to go in a linear fashion versus making it much more interactive and giving the power back to the learners, and giving them the agency to make choices on where they want to go. But there is some planning that takes place in doing that, because obviously the content cannot build upon each other when you have it split up like this. They kind of have to collect different pieces to make it all work together. So in our planning, we kind of designed it as a way that it could be done in any order, so that you do have that choice. So that's something you want to consider when you do yours. As far as learner engagement and assessments, there were a variety of learning tasks that you had to do, such as you had the place markers, you had, so in this case was a place marker, and I did try to give you designer tips throughout this example so that you could see exactly what slide apps were being used, in case you wanted to replicate them in your own lesson. We also had, here's an example where you had to do some drawing. We did have the locks, which were the number locks. This was a study set activity where you had to do some sorting. So each activity had something different for you to do. This was a text box slide app. We had another study set here where you were playing a matching game. And again, you had, the locks in the end. So there were a variety of different activities that you were exposed to. And for the grade of an A, according to the rubric, we had to have a minimum of 6 learning tasks total. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those were the learning tasks where you actually, did stuff with the content, which was business etiquette and things like that. Whereas these 3 were more related to the game. We did have 6 different kind of lessons, if you will, or activities. And then no more than 2 study sets. So in this case, we had 2 study sets. We had the matching game and the sorting game, but everything else were slides. In addition, at least 5 separate and different slide apps that were included inside the slide. So those are what I just showed you. We had drawing, we had the writing, we had the place marker, and we had a couple others in there as well. On the next part of the rubric is multimedia. So our learning tasks included a variety of different activities, such as readings. You had videos, infographics, there were images. We did have some interactive web tools. We had Google Docs, we had websites, so there was a variety in the actual learning activities. There was a lot of different things that you were working with in terms of multimedia. The breakout box strategy, we did use achievement keys and clues, a little bit of both in this game, that were awarded when learners demonstrated mastery. So as you got through the end of an activity, the last slide gave you either a key or a clue that you needed in order to move on in the game. In our particular game, we had you kind of collect things out of order and then end up using all that information depending on how you set things up. You know, in this case, I did have the breakout room locked, so there was something you had to earn somewhere along the way before you could get into that breakout room. So that's some things that you can kind of use to spice up your lesson as well. So locks and keys were included. We had at least two separate keys and clues paired to at least two corresponding locks. So we had multiple. We ended up having 1, 2 plus the 5 locks in here. So we had a lot of different locks, clues, and keys in this game. So above the expectations on that. But the criteria for an A is at least 2 sets of keys and or clues with the locks. Navigation. So there were explicit directions provided so that learners were able to navigate the path, especially in the beginning of the game. Here's an example of where it shows you the explicit directions. So clicking to the right arrow to continue to the next slide. That is showing students exactly what they need to do, or learners, exactly what they need to do in order to move on. Here, telling the learners that they need to collect this key. You know, so that they can move on. At the beginning of the study set, this message that pops up that tells the learners what to do to play the game, so having to match each skill to help solve the problem. That was created under advanced settings. So when we are in the study set, we go to advanced setting, and this message to show at the start, that is where we put our explicit direction at the front of the study set. And then again, for the slide activities, we use the box down at the bottom in order to use those explicit directions. So we do have those directions throughout. And then the rationale worksheet. So that's something that you will need to complete in order to submit. So here's an example of our worksheet that is completed. So you're going to be putting your name, you're going to be putting the title of the lesson, you're going to be describing the learner profile. So who is this lesson geared towards? So what grade level, subject area, and also any accommodations you might want to consider. So in this case, our game is designed for as professional development for about business etiquette and norms in a corporate setting, and is geared towards adults. And then some accommodations that our adults might need, such as screen magnifier to more easily see the small details on the screen, translation for English language learners. We use visual symbols throughout rather than relying solely on color. For those with vision concerns, they may not be able to see the difference between green and red. So we also had, you know, different symbols throughout. And there may be some support needed for people who are struggling with navigating the computer. We listed our learning goals here, which were also included in the actual deck, but they are listed here as well. This is where you would put your lesson standards. We have the URL of the deck lesson, and then when I'm done with the screencast, we will then put the URL to the screencast. So in order to get your URL to your breakout game, you're going to want to go to your dashboard, and wherever you have your deck, you want to click on the right drop down menu, and you want to click share with other teachers. And if you have not already, you will need to change the default from off to with a link. And when you share with a link, then here is the link that you can grab for your deck toy. And then you're going to put that right into your worksheet. Again, once you finish your screencast video, you will upload that to either YouTube, Google Drive, Vimeo, something with a link, and you will put that link here as well. This Rationale worksheet, if you created it in Google, please make sure that you change it so that anyone with a link can view. And then you want to copy that link, and this is the link that you will be submitting in Canvas and on your portfolio, because that way whoever wants to see your lesson can then get an idea first of who the lesson is designed for, what kind of learning goals it's hoping to achieve, and then be able to view both the actual lesson deck as well as your screencast overview. So as you can see, we have met all of the requirements for the grade of an A. And as indicated above the rubric, please make sure that that you are including well-defined directions for your learners, otherwise your grade will drop down to the next grade level. If you do choose to achieve a specific grade level, then your instructor will be expecting that you include all of the components listed in that criteria for that grade. Otherwise, your project will bump down to whatever the appropriate level is where all of the components have been met. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on this assignment.